When did someone show up for you in a way you didn't expect? I was 22 when my world imploded on a Tuesday morning in October. My dad collapsed at his construction site. Massive heart attack. No warning. One minute he was framing a house, the next he was fighting for his life in intensive care. The doctor said he needed emergency bypass surgery, but our insurance had lapsed 3 months earlier when his company downsized. We need a $47,000 deposit before we can schedule the operation, the billing coordinator explained, her voice professional but not unkind. Without it, we can only provide stabilizing care. Stabilizing care. Medical speak for letting him die slowly. Mom had been gone since I was 8. Brain cancer took her when the bills from her treatment bankrupted us the first time. Dad never remarried, just worked himself into the ground trying to rebuild what we'd lost. Now history was repeating itself, and I felt like I was drowning in the same nightmare that had stolen my childhood. The same crushing weight of watching someone you love slip away while you stood helpless. I'd been saving every penny from my job at the auto parts store, living in a studio apartment that was basically a closet with a hot plate. Ramen noodles for dinner most nights, secondhand clothes, no cable, no social life. My entire savings account had $3,147. Dad's checking account had $312. We'd already sold Mom's jewelry years ago, the last pieces of her we had left. I spent the next 2 days calling every bank, charity, and relative we had left. Nothing. Dad's brothers had their own problems. One was unemployed, the other dealing with his wife's dialysis treatments. The banks laughed at my loan applications. A 22-year-old with no credit and no collateral asking for 50 grand. GoFundMe raised $200 in 48 hours. Nowhere near enough. I posted on every social media platform, shared the link everywhere, begged friends to spread the word. Still nothing close to what we needed. By Thursday night, sitting in that sterile hospital hallway, I'd run out of options. Dad was stable but fading. Every hour that passed without surgery meant more damage to his heart. The nurses wouldn't look me in the eye anymore. I could see pity in their faces when they thought I wasn't watching. The same look they'd given me when Mom was dying. That careful, professional sympathy that meant they'd seen this story before and knew how it ended. That's when Tobias walked into my life. I was crying in the hospital cafeteria at 2 a.m., staring at my phone, calculating impossible math. Maybe I could sell my car, take out credit cards, beg strangers on the street. Nothing added up to enough. The vending machine hummed in the corner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and everything smelled like disinfectant and despair. That's when this guy in coveralls sat down across from me. He was maybe 60, weathered hands wrapped around a coffee cup, work boots caked with dried concrete, gray hair peeking out from under a baseball cap, tired eyes that had seen plenty of hard days. "You're Ray Carmichael's kid," he said. Not a question. I looked up, confused. "Do I know you?" "Name's Tobias. Worked with your dad on the Morrison project last summer. Heard about what happened." I nodded, too exhausted to be polite. Another well-wisher offering thoughts and prayers while my father died upstairs. I'd heard it all week. People telling me to stay strong, that everything happens for a reason, that God has a plan. Empty words that did nothing to pay hospital bills. "Listen," Tobias said, leaning forward. "I know you don't know me from Adam, but I got something to tell you." He pulled out a folded check and placed it on the table between us. The paper looked worn, like he'd been carrying it around for a while. I couldn't process what I was seeing. The amount was written in careful block letters, $47,000. "This isn't real," I whispered. "It's real," Tobias said quietly, "and it's yours." My hands were shaking as I picked up the check. "I don't understand. Why would you—" "Your dad saved my life 15 years ago," he interrupted. "I was drinking heavy back then. Lost my job, my wife, nearly lost my kids. One night I was standing on the Riverside Bridge ready to jump. Your father talked me down. Spent 3 hours in the rain just talking to me like I was worth something." Tobias stared into his coffee cup. He didn't know me. Could have driven right past. Instead, he pulled over, walked onto that bridge, and convinced a stranger that tomorrow might be better. I felt tears starting again. Dad never mentioned. Course he didn't. That's who Ray is. He don't make a big show of doing right. Tobias met my eyes. After that night, I got sober. Started my own contracting business. Been clean for 14 years now. My kids talk to me again. Got remarried to a woman who actually loves me. He pushed the check closer. I've been waiting 15 years to pay this debt. Figured I'd never get the chance. Then I heard about Ray being in here, and I knew this was it. I stared at the check, afraid to touch it. "I can't take this. It's too much." "Boy, you listen to me." Tobias's voice got stern. "Your father gave me everything when he saved my life. This money, it's nothing compared to what he gave me. My kids knowing their daddy. My wife having a husband who comes home sober. The business I built with these hands." He held up his calloused palms. "Every house I've framed, every foundation I've poured, every paycheck I've earned, that's all because Ray Carmichael saw something worth saving in a broken-down drunk on a bridge." I was sobbing now, clutching the check. "But this is your money, your savings. I got plenty more where that came from," Tobias said. "Business has been good to me, real good. And you know why? Because your dad taught me that one person can make all the difference in the world." He stood up, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You go get that surgery scheduled. Ray's got more work to do in this world." I ran to the billing office, check in hand. The night coordinator looked skeptical until she verified the funds. Within an hour, Dad was being prepped for surgery. The operation took 8 hours. I paced the waiting room, replaying Tobias's words. My father had saved a stranger's life and never said a word about it. How many other lives had he touched without me knowing? During those 8 hours, something incredible happened. Word had somehow spread about what Tobias had done. Construction workers started showing up at the hospital, guys who'd worked with Dad over the years, men who knew him as someone who'd lend tools, share lunch, or cover shifts when someone had family problems. A grizzled old foreman named Charlie sat down beside me around hour 5. Your dad ever tell you about the time he found me passed out drunk in my truck? I shook my head. This was maybe 10 years ago. I'd been drinking my paycheck away, sleeping in the cab behind a 7-Eleven. Ray found me, drove me to a clinic, sat with me through detox. Charlie's voice cracked. Never said a word to the other guys. Never made me feel like a charity case. Just treated me like a man worth helping. Before I could respond, another man approached. Miguel, probably in his 50s, holding a thermos of coffee. Ray helped my family when ICE was threatening deportation, Miguel said quietly. Paid for our lawyer, wrote character references, even testified in court about my work ethic. We're citizens now because of him. One by one, they shared their stories. Dad had co-signed an apartment lease for Danny when he got out of prison. He'd driven Jerome to job interviews when his car broke down. He'd paid for Luis's kids' medical bills when insurance wouldn't cover a surgery. Your father, said a young guy named Trevor, caught me stealing tools from job sites when I was 17. Instead of turning me in, he hired me as his assistant, taught me the trade. I own my own electrical company now. By the time Dr. Hendricks emerged from surgery, there were 27 men in that waiting room, all there because Ray Carmichael had touched their lives in ways I'd never known about. The surgery went perfectly, Dr. Hendricks announced to the crowd. Your father's heart is strong. He should make a full recovery. The cheer that went up could probably be heard 3 floors away. When Dad woke up 2 days later, the first thing he said was, "Did we make the house payment?" I laughed through my tears. Don't worry about money, Dad. Someone took care of everything. Who? I told him about Tobias, about the bridge, about the check. Dad's eyes filled with tears. Tobias Henderson, he whispered. I remember him. Broken man. Thought I'd failed him when he wouldn't take my card. You didn't fail him, Dad. You saved him. And he's not the only one. I spent the next hour telling him about all the men who'd shown up during his surgery. With each story, Dad's amazement grew. I was just doing what felt right, he kept saying. Exactly. And it came back to save your life. The recovery was slower than we'd hoped. Dad needed weeks of cardiac rehabilitation, physical therapy, and careful monitoring. But every day brought visitors, former co-workers, neighbors, people whose stories I was just beginning to understand. Mrs. Patterson from down the street brought homemade soup every Tuesday. She told me how Dad had shoveled her driveway every snowfall for 12 years without being asked. Never would take payment, she said. Said neighbors help neighbors. An elderly man named Frank visited on Thursdays, always bringing the newspaper and a chess set. Turned out Dad had been driving Frank to dialysis appointments for 3 years after Frank's wife died, and he had no other transportation. Ray never missed an appointment, Frank told me. Even came on Christmas morning when I had an emergency session. Sat with me for 4 hours, just talking about baseball and old movies. But the most surprising visitor was a teenage girl named Zoe. She came with her mother, both of them nervous and emotional. Your dad doesn't know us, Zoe's mother Patricia explained. But 5 years ago, he saved our lives. She told me how they'd been in a car accident during a thunderstorm. Their car had skidded off the road into a ditch, upside down, filling with water. Dad had been driving home from a late job when he saw the accident. The fire department said later that your father risked his life crawling into that car, Patricia said. He got Zoe out first, then came back for me. By the time the EMTs arrived, he was unconscious from smoke inhalation. Zoe, now 16, spoke up. I've been wanting to thank him for years. My mom said we should wait until I was old enough to understand what he did for us. Dad was amazed by their visit. I barely remember that night, he admitted. You were both unconscious. I just did what anyone would do. No, Patricia said firmly. Most people would have called 911 and waited. You risked everything for strangers. As Dad grew stronger, we started talking about the future. The medical bills were paid, but he couldn't return to heavy construction work. His cardiologist was clear. No more climbing ladders, lifting heavy materials, or working in extreme temperatures. 40 years of construction work, Dad said sadly. Don't know how to do anything else. That's when Tobias made another surprising appearance. I got a proposition for you, he said one afternoon as we sat on Dad's porch. My business is booming, but I need a partner. Someone who knows quality work, can manage crews, handle the planning side. Dad looked interested but hesitant. Tobias, I appreciate the offer, but I can't work like I used to. Who said anything about swinging hammers? Tobias interrupted. I need a project manager, someone to coordinate jobs, work with clients, handle the paperwork, all the stuff I hate doing, but you're good at. Over the next month, they worked out the details. Carmichael and Henderson Construction was born, a partnership between two men whose lives had intersected in the most unexpected way. Their first project was renovating a house for a single mother named Diana, who'd been laid off from her nursing job. She needed basic repairs, leaky roof, broken furnace, electrical issues, but couldn't afford a contractor. We'll work out a payment plan, Dad told her. You can pay us what you can when you can. Diana broke down crying. Why would you do this for a stranger? Dad and Tobias exchanged a look. Because someone did it for us, Dad said simply. The Diana project set the tone for their business model. They'd take on bigger commercial jobs to fund their community work. For every high-paying client, they'd help a family in need. Word spread quickly through the community. Churches started referring families to them. Social workers gave out their business cards. The local newspaper ran a feature story about their unusual business model. We're not trying to be heroes, Dad explained to the reporter. We're just trying to pay forward what was given to us. Within 6 months, they had a waiting list of both paying clients and families needing help. They hired Danny, the ex-con Dad had helped years earlier, as their first full-time employee. Ray gave me a chance when no one else would, Danny told me. Now I get to help give other people chances. Their second hire was Miguel's son, Antonio, fresh out of trade school and looking for an apprenticeship. Their third was Trevor, the former tool thief who'd become a successful electrician and wanted to be part of their mission. By the end of their first year, Carmichael and Henderson had completed 37 paying projects and 22 pro bono jobs. They'd renovated houses for 3 veteran families, fixed a community center's heating system for free, and built a playground for a daycare center that couldn't afford one. But the project that changed everything was Elena Rodriguez. Elena was 19, 7 months pregnant, and fleeing an abusive relationship. She'd found refuge at a women's shelter, but the shelter was overcrowded and could only house her for 30 days. The shelter director, Maria Santos, called our office desperate for help. Elena's got a job lined up at the medical center, but she needs a place to live before the baby comes. There's a small apartment above the bakery on Elm Street. The owner said she could have it cheap if someone could make it livable. Dad and I went to look at the space. It was a disaster. Water damage, broken windows, holes in the walls, no working heat. The bakery owner, an elderly Italian man named Giuseppe, met us there. I want to help the girl, Giuseppe said in heavily accented English, but I cannot afford big repairs. If you can make it safe for baby, she can live here for almost nothing. Dad walked through the space, making notes. This is a big job, Giuseppe. We're talking new drywall, plumbing work, electrical upgrades, maybe $15,000 in materials alone. Giuseppe's face fell. I have maybe $3,000. That'll cover it, Dad said. I stared at him. Dad, the materials alone will cost $3,000 will cover it, he repeated firmly. I didn't understand until later. Dad and Tobias had decided to cover the rest themselves, along with donating all their labor, but they didn't want Giuseppe to feel like charity. Elena moved in 3 weeks before her daughter was born. The apartment was small but perfect. Fresh paint, new appliances, a nursery area with a crib Dad had built by hand. I don't know how to thank you, Elena told us, tears streaming down her face. You already have, Dad replied. You trusted us to help. That's thanks enough. Elena's daughter, Isabella, was born healthy and strong. Elena worked hard at her job as a medical assistant and eventually saved enough to rent a larger place, but she stayed in touch with our family. 2 years later, she called with incredible news. She'd been accepted to nursing school. I want to help other women like me, she explained. Women who need someone to show up for them when they don't expect it. Elena's story caught the attention of local media, and suddenly everyone wanted to know about Carmichael and Henderson construction. We were featured in newspapers, on radio shows, even on a regional television program about community heroes. We're not heroes, Dad kept insisting. We're just guys who learned that helping people comes back to you in ways you never expect. The publicity brought unexpected opportunities. A major housing nonprofit approached us about partnering on a project to build affordable homes for first-time buyers. A local bank offered to finance community projects at reduced interest rates. The city council invited us to bid on the new community center project, but it also brought unexpected challenges. Some established contractors weren't happy about our pro bono work. They accused us of unfair competition, claiming we were undercutting prices by working for free. If everyone starts giving away their work, complained a contractor named Bill Hartley at a city council meeting, how are the rest of us supposed to make a living? Dad stood up to respond. We're not giving away anything, Bill. We're investing in our community. Every family we help becomes a family that can eventually pay for services. Every kid we give a safe home to becomes a kid who might grow up to build something great. He looked around the room. 15 years ago, someone invested in me when I had nothing to offer in return. That investment created jobs, supported families, and made this community stronger. That's not unfair competition. That's how communities are supposed to work. The room erupted in applause, but I could see we'd made some enemies. The opposition escalated when we bid on the community center project. Hartley and 2 other contractors filed a formal complaint, claiming our nonprofit work constituted illegal dumping and should disqualify us from public contracts. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Dad spent days preparing his defense, gathering testimonials from families we'd helped, documenting how our work had strengthened the community. The night before the hearing, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers, looking worried for the first time since his recovery. What if they're right? He said. What if we've been doing this wrong? Dad, you've helped dozens of families. You've created jobs. You've made the community better. How could that be wrong? Maybe I'm being naive, he said. Maybe there are rules I don't understand. That's when the doorbell rang. It was Elena, holding 3-year-old Isabella. Miss Maria at the shelter told me about the hearing tomorrow, Elena said. I wanted to give you this. She handed Dad a folder. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Families we'd helped, employees we'd hired, neighbors whose lives had been touched by our work. I organized them, Elena explained. Everyone wanted to speak for you, but Miss Maria said you might need these instead. Dad read the first letter, from Diana, the single mother whose house we'd renovated. It detailed how our help had allowed her to keep her home, return to nursing school, and eventually buy a house of her own. The second was from Trevor, describing how Dad's trust had turned him from a teenage thief into a successful business owner who now employed 12 people. The third was from Patricia and Zoe, the mother and daughter from the car accident, explaining how Dad's heroism had given them 17 years of life together that wouldn't have existed otherwise. Letter after letter, story after story, life after life that had been changed by Dad's simple belief that helping people was the right thing to do. "This is what you've built," Elena said softly. "Not just houses, lives, futures, hope." The hearing the next morning was packed. Hartley and his supporters sat on one side, armed with legal arguments and procedural complaints. Our friends and families we'd helped filled the other side, clutching Elena's letters. The city attorney read the complaint. Technical violations, unfair practices, improper bidding procedures. It all sounded very official and damning. Then Devin Chen, who joined the city council since our first meeting, asked to speak. "I've known Ray Carmichael for years," he said. "He helped my family during one of our darkest times, asking nothing in return. That generosity taught my daughter that there are people in this world who help because it's right, not because they get something back." He held up Elena's folder. "These letters represent 43 families whose lives have been transformed by Carmichael and Henderson Construction. That's 43 families who are now taxpayers, homeowners, contributors to our economy." Devin looked directly at Hartley. "You want to talk about unfair competition? These men have created more business for all of us by making our community stronger. Every family they've helped becomes a family that can afford to hire contractors, buy materials, invest in their homes." One by one, people stood to speak. Giuseppe, the bakery owner, talked about how Elena's presence had brought new customers to his business. Frank described how Dad's reliability had inspired him to volunteer as a driver for other elderly residents. Patricia explained how Dad's heroism had motivated her to become an EMT. But the most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source. Antonio, Miguel's son, stood up near the back of the room. He was 24 now, a skilled carpenter, and one of our best employees. "5 years ago, my family was living in fear," he said. "My father worked construction, but we were undocumented. Every day we worried about deportation, about being separated." He looked at Dad. "Ray Carmichael didn't just hire my father. He fought for our family, paid for lawyers, testified in court, vouched for my father's character. Because of him, we became citizens." Antonio's voice grew stronger. "Now I employ 3 people in my own side business. I bought a house last year. I pay taxes, vote, contribute to this community. My younger sister is pre-med at State University." He paused, emotion thick in his voice. "How do you measure the value of that? How do you put a price on the ripple effects of one man's kindness?" When the testimonies ended, the room was silent. The city attorney looked at Hartley and his supporters. "Do you still wish to proceed with this complaint?" Hartley shifted uncomfortably. We just wanted to ensure fair business practices." "Mr. Hartley," said Councilmember Janet Walsh, "in your opinion, what would be fair recompense for saving a child's life? For preventing a family's deportation? For turning a teenage criminal into a successful businessman?" Hartley had no answer. The complaint was dismissed unanimously. Carmichael and Henderson was awarded the community center contract. As we left the courthouse, Elena caught up with us in the parking lot. "Thank you for showing me what it means to fight for what's right," she said. "You didn't need us to teach you that," Dad replied. "You already had that strength. We just gave you a chance to use it." 3 months later, Elena graduated from nursing school. She took a job at the hospital where Dad had his surgery, working in the cardiac unit. "I want to help save hearts," she told us, "just like you saved mine." The community center project became our largest and most visible work. But more importantly, it became a symbol of what was possible when people worked together. We hired local subcontractors whenever possible, including some of the men who'd initially opposed us. Hartley's electrical company did the wiring, and